"We need younger talent who will work for half your salary," Troy said, leaning back in his chair like he was doing me a favor. "You're just too expensive for where we're headed," he repeated, with that spreadsheet-glazed look in his eyes. That was the exact moment I realized he had no idea who he was messing with. "My name is Colin Mercer. I'm 50, and for 15 years I was the Senior Client Success Executive at Eastbridge Solutions, a name no one knew when I started, and everyone recognized by the time they pushed me out. Back then, we were just a cramped suite on the 3rd floor of a dying strip mall. 3 desks, 1 flickering light, and a phone that never stopped ringing. I didn't walk in with an MBA or a fancy pitch deck. I walked in with a notepad, a pair of worn-out shoes, and a gut feeling that trust still mattered. I built every relationship by hand. When Brian from Apex Freight got hit with a sudden inspection that threatened to freeze his whole operation, I stayed up till 2 a.m. rewriting every logistics clause in his contract. When Lila from North Park Healthcare lost her mom, I flew out just to deliver documents in person. Because that's what you do when your clients aren't numbers, they're people. But all that, it doesn't show up in a KPI report. Especially, not one curated by someone like Tanner Briggs, the new regional director. Fresh out of a startup in Austin, mid-30s, polished, charming in a LinkedIn quote kind of way. He showed up with consultants, metrics, and this obsession with modernizing what he didn't bother to understand. He'd glance at me like I was a rotary phone in a 5G world, not angry, just dismissive, like I was a relic. You could see it in how the meetings shifted. Less strategy, more buzzwords. They started calling long-term clients legacy accounts, like that was a bad thing. My desk got moved, my title got reevaluated, and suddenly, interns were leading calls. I used to close in my sleep. I didn't argue, I didn't flinch. Because while Tanner was busy color-coding his quarterly deck, I was memorizing the phone numbers of every client who still called me before anyone else. And believe me, they were going to call. Very soon. I joined Eastbridge when it was barely an idea with a logo. Just 11 of us trying to survive on month-to-month contracts and lukewarm coffee. We didn't have a real HR department. Our CRM was a color-coded spreadsheet, and we sure as hell didn't have a brand strategy. We had grit. Back then, the founder, Martin Dyer, used to say, "We don't outspend competitors, we outcare them." And he meant it. He'd stay late answering client emails himself. If a partner had a tech issue, he'd jump in the car with one of us to fix it. There were no layers, no silence, no hiding behind departments. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Word started spreading that Eastbridge wasn't like the others. We didn't upsell, we solved. We didn't vanish after onboarding, we followed, through. By year 3, we'd gone from servicing regional accounts to locking down national partnerships. And I was in the middle of it. Every pitch, every negotiation, every midnight call from a panicked client. I was there. We grew to over 120 employees, moved to a real office downtown, and got ourselves listed on 3 industry rankings. People thought we were just lucky. But luck doesn't keep contracts rolling for 15 years. It was never just about tech or pricing. It was trust. And trust, once earned, doesn't get replaced by someone with a fresher LinkedIn photo. That's what Tanner never understood. He walked into a company with soul and started treating it like a trend he could rebrand. But underneath the new paint, the foundation was still built by people like me, who bled for every inch of progress. And soon he'd find out what happens when you gut a company's heart and expect it to keep beating. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does. First came the team restructuring emails, vague, upbeat, filled with terms like agility, efficiency, alignment. Then came the meetings I used to lead, now held without me. One by one, I watched junior reps step into calls I had managed for years, fumbling through names they didn't recognize and pain points they didn't understand. I was told it was a chance to mentor the next generation. What it really was. A slow erasure. Tanner started bringing in his people. Young, hungry, fresh out of grad school, they had perfect pitch decks and 0 real-world experience. I remember walking past one of the new hires, Tiffany maybe, struggling to answer a client's basic question about a service level clause. She smiled, said, "Let me get back to you," and promptly slacked me for the answer. I gave it to her, quietly. But that's when I knew I was being replaced in pieces. My client list, once protected, was now public knowledge. Contacts I'd nurtured for over a decade were suddenly being courted by reps who thought rapport was a quick Zoom call and a LinkedIn follow. One afternoon, I overheard two of the new hires at the espresso machine. "Is that Colin?" one asked. "Yeah, he's like legacy, total old school. Tanner says he used to be a beast back in the day." Back in the day, like I was some museum piece, polished and forgotten. They moved my desk, again, far from the windows, closer to the break room. A symbolic relocation, if ever there was one. My title stayed the same, but the gravity around me disappeared. Fewer emails, fewer calls, fewer decisions. But I didn't panic. I watched. I documented. I stayed late when no one was around. Because, while they were busy stripping my authority, I was making copies of deals, of metrics, of every instance where a junior rep mishandled a client that only stayed because I intervened behind the scenes. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was calculation. Because what no one at Eastbridge realized, not Tanner, not the fresh hires, not even the board, was that I wasn't gone. Not really. I was just watching the cracks form from the inside. And when the first one split wide, open, I'd be ready. 2 weeks after I was officially phased out of client operations, the first crack appeared. It came in the form of an email. Simple subject line, "Can I still reach out to you directly?" It was from Brian, head EU, of logistics at Apex Freight. A man I'd helped through 2 company mergers, 3 software transitions, and 1 nasty vendor lawsuit. He'd been handed off to one of Tanner's new hires, and within a month, shipments were delayed. Invoicing got botched, and the trust we'd built? Gone. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to. Because I needed him to feel it. The next day, Lila from North Park Healthcare called my cell. I didn't even know she still had the number. Her voice was clipped, professional, but there was tension in it. "We've been told you're no longer our point of contact." I stayed quiet. "Colin, this new girl sent us a renewal draft. It's wrong. She even got our billing address mixed up." More silence. "We need this fixed. Can you help us or not?" I could feel it, the quiet unraveling, and I wasn't lifting a finger to stop it. At the office, Tanner and his crew were too busy prepping for a quarterly presentation to notice the small fires starting. But I noticed. I always did. The follow-up emails, the confused calls, the slow, desperate realization that replacing wisdom with Wi-Fi didn't guarantee stability. Tanner stopped by my desk once, gave me that corporate grin, and asked if I'd be open to shadowing some of the new reps, help ease the handoff. I just smiled and said, "That ship sailed, remember?" He blinked. Didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to no. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent the last 3 months building a private record. Call logs, email threads, client complaints, all documented, all time-stamped, all connected to decisions, made after they'd cut me out. And I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was still like the eye of a storm. Every day I walked in, sipped my coffee, typed a few quiet notes, smiled at the interns. And every night I added another piece to the archive, because I knew something they didn't. You don't fire the foundation and expect the house to stand. It was a Thursday morning, 9:17 a.m. Same stale coffee, same recycled air, same silent detachment from the people around me. Then my phone buzzed. Subject line, "Let's talk." Sender, Erica Penn, VP of Client Strategy at Nexacor Group. A name that carried weight. We'd crossed paths a few years back during a joint project. She remembered how I handled a failing rollout with 0 drama and 100% precision. "You saved our skin back then. I never forgot that," she wrote. She had heard somehow about the changes at Eastbridge, about how I'd been repositioned, and she had an idea. Something bigger than just a job offer. She wanted me to build something, lead a new division, handpick my team, full autonomy, direct pipeline to the executive board. I stared at the email for a full minute, then stood up, walked out of the building, and didn't come back until noon. That afternoon, while Tanner paced the hallway rehearsing slides for the upcoming client summit, I booked a private lunch with Erica. No rush, no desperation, just two professionals talking opportunity. She slid a folder across the table, ironically the same way Tanner once had during my demotion. Only this one had vision, respect, resources. I opened it slowly, pretending not to be impressed. But I was. "We don't just want your contacts," she said. "We want your judgment. That's what they threw away, and that's what we're betting on." I didn't accept right then. I didn't need to. Timing was everything. The next morning, Eastbridge sent out an internal memo. Client escalation protocols, temporary realignments. Translation? The ship was leaking and they didn't know where the water was coming in. By then, 5 of my legacy accounts had reached out, directly. 3 of them paused renewals. 1 threatened to terminate unless I was reinstated. But I stayed quiet. No panic, no gloating, just strategy. A week later, I handed in my resignation. Simple, direct, and attached with a list of clients who had already asked me where I was going next. Tanner called a last-minute meeting. His voice cracked on the second sentence. "Colin, can we talk about this? Maybe there's a way to keep you on board in a new role." I leaned back in my chair. "The decision's made," I said, calm as ever. "This company doesn't value what I do, but someone else does." I left the folder on his desk. No secrets, no threats. Just data. Proof of how their new generation had torched a decade of relationship equity in under a quarter. Then I walked out. No security escort, no cardboard box. Just a leather binder under my arm, and the quiet weight of momentum on my side. And as I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. Another client asking where I was headed. I smiled, because now they would follow. They say the walls don't fall all at once. That's a lie. At Eastbridge, they collapsed like cheap drywall in a thunderstorm. It started small, an internal alert about a missed renewal with Apex Freight. Then a technical issue that delayed invoice processing for a key healthcare client. Lila, the one who used to call me when she needed something fixed, not explained. Then came the public part. 3 major accounts suspended service within 48 hours of my departure. Not coincidentally, the same 3 that had already spoken to me. Tanner held a meeting to address concerns. He tried to spin it as market fluctuation. But when your top clients are jumping ship and telling people why, there's no deck you can build to hide that. I wasn't watching it all unfold out of bitterness. I was watching it out of curiosity. Because when you pull the core from a system and leave it hollow, the crash isn't sabotage, it's gravity. The board got involved by week 2. Emergency meetings, audit requests, senior clients demanding answers. One by one, I got texts from old colleagues asking if I'd heard the rumors. Is it true Lila pulled her contract? Did Brian actually threaten litigation? Did you really turn down a counteroffer? The answer to all 3? Yes, but I said nothing. I was already deep into onboarding at Nexacor. New office, new team, new energy. The difference was immediate. Respect wasn't earned twice. It was offered from day 1. Tanner, meanwhile, was drowning. I heard through back channels that he tried to bring back one of the reps he'd pushed out a few months before. No dice. Apparently he even reached out to Erica. She laughed. Literally laughed and told him I was non-compete free and fully operational. And then came the legal letter. Not to me. To Nexacor. A cease and desist, claiming breach of contract, client interference, misuse of proprietary information. Our lawyers read it, chuckled, and slid it right back across the table. You see, I'd done everything by the book, didn't poach, didn't solicit. The clients came to me, on their own, documented, time-stamped, and filed. I never fought dirty. I just let the truth handle the heavy lifting. I got the call from an old friend inside compliance late Friday. Voice low, like she was afraid the walls could listen. You were right. About everything. She didn't have to say more. I already knew. But I let her continue. Turns out the collapse at Eastbridge wasn't just incompetence, it was orchestration. Tanner hadn't come in just to modernize. He came in to clear the field, strip the old guard, inflate metrics, cut costs on paper by gutting experience and overpromising on scalability. And then, sell. He was prepping Eastbridge for acquisition, a quiet backdoor deal with a tech firm from Chicago that wanted a rapid entry into the client management space. But for the buyout to go through, Eastbridge had to look leaner, younger, cheaper. Not better, just more appealing. That's why I had to go. That's why so many of us were cut or buried in special projects. We weren't liabilities. We were inconvenient truths. But here's the thing. You can't fake sustainability. You can't Photoshop trust. The deal fell apart the week after I left. The buyers got spooked when 3 of the top-tier clients terminated agreements. One of them, Lila, personally contacted the buyer's legal department and made it crystal clear, Eastbridge without Colin isn't Eastbridge at all. And that triggered a review, internal emails, meeting transcripts, Slack logs. That's when they found it. Communications between Tanner and one of the board advisors outlining their transition plan. Bullet points like, rebrand legacy relationships under younger talent, phase out inflated salaries by Q3, package replacements with growth opportunity narrative, and this one, which hit like a punch to the gut, Colin Mercer, high trust, high cost, strategically remove. They didn't even try to code it. I was a line item. I remember sitting in my new office reading the forwarded screenshots, just still, not sad, not angry, just cold clarity. After everything I gave, after everything I built, I was an equation in someone else's exit plan. But here's the twist. It didn't break me. It validated me. Because while they schemed in the shadows, I documented everything. Not to use it. Just because that's who I am. Meticulous. Precise. A professional. And now that quiet diligence was the very thing burning their entire plan to ash. Tanner was reassigned. The board released a vague statement about leadership changes. And those fancy consultants who'd nodded through the meetings, nowhere to be found. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't need to. Because when a man stands for 15 years and is pushed down for being too expensive, and then the whole house crumbles behind him, he doesn't need revenge. The truth is the revenge. It started simple, just a whiteboard, one column, who I trust. Another, who trusts me. And you know what? That list filled up faster than I expected. I wasn't trying to start a company, not at first. I just wanted to help a few people get what they weren't getting anymore. Stability, clarity, actual support. But when word got out that I'd joined Nexacore, something shifted. Former colleagues reached out, then former clients, then their referrals. 3 weeks in, Erica pulled me aside. We didn't hire you to keep things small, Colin. You're building something, so let's build it right. That's when we decided, no more legacy systems, no recycled playbooks, no fluff. We'd do it different. Real strategy, real partnerships, no buzzwords. I handpicked my team. Not the flashiest resumes, but the sharpest instincts. People who'd been ignored, sidelined, underestimated, just like I had. People like Tara, a contracts specialist who'd been passed over twice at Eastbridge despite saving millions in liability last year. And Wes, a project manager who used to shadow me silently during launches. Now, he's leading them. Every decision we made was rooted in quality, not speed, sustainability, not PR. We didn't just onboard clients. We onboarded trust. I'll never forget our first pitch to a major logistics firm, the same one Tanner once tried to poach behind my back. They walked into our conference room skeptical, quiet, arms crossed. By the end of the hour, they weren't asking about pricing. They were asking when we could start. The best part? I wasn't selling anymore. I was just telling the truth. Clients didn't care about our name. They cared that I remembered how their last rollout failed, that I knew who their operations manager was married to, that I still had notes from a pain point they flagged 2 years ago. And inside the team, there was no hierarchy. No fear, just respect. Ideas flowed. Meetings ended on time. People left feeling heard, not drained. We built processes that worked because we didn't chase trends. We addressed reality. Every time I walked into that new office, I didn't feel important. I felt useful. And that was enough. Because after all the noise, all the betrayal, all the silent humiliation, I wasn't just back on my feet. I was building a new foundation. Not just for me. The email came from a domain I hadn't seen in months, eastbridgecorp.com. Subject line: exploring a potential partnership. I didn't open it right away. I didn't need to. 2 days later, Erica stepped into my office, phone in hand. "You're not going to believe this," she said, half laughing, half annoyed. "They want a meeting with you." Turns out the board had restructured again. A soft phrase for Tanner's gone, and now no one knows what to do. Client loss had crippled their pipeline. Morale was toast. And their last 3 attempts at outsourcing failed spectacularly. They wanted help integrating their remaining accounts into something sustainable. In other words, they wanted me to fix what they broke. I agreed to the meeting. Not out of ego, not for revenge, for clarity. The new interim CEO, some soft-spoken finance guy named Leonard, tried to frame it like a win-win. "You know the systems. The clients trust you. We'd like to contract Nexicor to oversee the transition and possibly guide a full integration." Translation? Save us from our own mistakes. Again, I didn't flinch. I didn't smirk. I just nodded, listening as he laid out a proposal filled with consultant jargon and desperate optimism. When he finished, I opened my folder. Simple, quiet, prepared. "Here's what this looks like, if we do it my way. A full audit of their remaining client base. 0 tolerance for bureaucratic roadblocks. My team in full control. No joint branding, no shared leadership, and absolute authority to dismiss anyone who obstructed the process." Leonard blinked. "That's quite a list of demands." "No," I said calmly. "That's a list of conditions. Take it or leave it." They took it, because they had no other option. And they knew it. The integration took 4 months. We salvaged what we could, redirected what wasn't worth saving, and protected every client who still had faith in people, not logos. But here's the part that still gets me. At the end of our final session, Leonard stood up, shook my hand, and said, "You were right about everything. We just didn't see it until it was too late." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because standing there, not as a discarded relic, but as the architect of the new standard, I finally understood something. Power isn't about title, or salary, or corner offices. It's about being the one they call when everything falls apart, and the one who decides whether or not to answer. It was a Tuesday. Rainy, quiet, the kind of morning that makes the city feel smaller. I pulled into the underground parking garage of the East Bridge building out of habit more than anything. Same turn, same spot, same dull hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Except this time I wasn't badging in with a sinking stomach or an expiration date taped to my future. This time, I had the keys. Nexicor had finalized the systems handoff. Most of the remaining East Bridge staff had already been absorbed or let go. The building was being sold, transition paperwork needed my final signature, and so I returned unannounced with no one waiting at the elevator. 5th floor. My old floor. I stepped out, and for a moment it was like nothing had changed. Same potted plant that hadn't been watered in years. Same coffee machine that groaned like it hated its job. And just a few desks still left standing like artifacts in a forgotten museum. No one rushed to greet me. No wide eyes, no applause. And that was perfect, because I didn't need a redemption arc. I lived mine. I walked past my old desk. It was empty now. Dust on the surface. A faint outline where my family photo used to sit. For a second, I thought about putting something there, but then I realized I didn't need to. The real mark I left? It wasn't a mug or a nameplate. It was the silence that filled that space after I was gone, the deals that fell through, the people who left, the systems no one else knew how to fix. That silence had been loud enough. I signed the final transition document on the old conference table, the same one where Tanner once slid my fate across like a cheap contract. This time, I didn't sit down. I didn't even take off my coat, just signed it, nodded once, walked out, down the elevator, through the lobby, no security escort, no cardboard box, no eyes avoiding mine. Just a quiet exit, not as an employee, but as the man who had finally closed the loop on his terms. The calls didn't stop after the deal closed. Former colleagues, young reps looking for direction, even clients who had no current contract, just questions, doubts, or the need for a voice they trusted. But instead of scaling up again, chasing more, I paused, because somewhere between revenge and redemption, I realized something. This was never just about rebuilding my career. It was about breaking a pattern. The same system that tossed me aside was still chewing through fresh talent every day. Brilliant young people being burned out, disillusioned, molded into corporate templates before they even knew who they were. So I did something different. I launched a mentorship program inside Nexacore, quietly, no press release, no LinkedIn, fireworks, just a handwritten note on the office door. If you've been overlooked, undervalued, or underestimated, you're who I'm here for. I took on 5 mentees the first year. They weren't the loudest or the most polished. They were the ones who stayed after meetings with questions, the ones who listened, the ones who reminded me of myself, before the titles, before the politics. One of them, Jared, had been on the verge of quitting after a manager told him he was too soft for client work. He now leads an account division with the highest retention in the company. Another, Maya, thought she didn't belong in strategy because she wasn't data-driven enough. Her client satisfaction score broke internal records 3 months in. And me? I didn't need the spotlight anymore. Just a front-row seat to something that finally made sense. Every month, I'd bring the group together for one simple session. No slides, no spreadsheets, just a round table and this one question. What would the person who fired you say if they saw you now? It always led to laughter. And something deeper. Because legacy isn't a building. It's not your name on them. It's what people carry after you've left the room, and if I've learned anything, it's that the most powerful revenge isn't proving someone wrong, it's helping someone else believe they were always right. I never raised my voice. I never fought back in the room where they tried to erase me. I just waited, watched, remembered who I was, and now I don't need to prove anything, because the truth, it doesn't shout, it just stays standing, long after the noise has burned itself out.